Hi, David Sears here, former Navy SEAL commander, retired, managing partner at Xundis Global, and author of Smarter Not Harder. Today on Dove, we're going to talk about Russia and Ukraine as a metaphor for business and life. We're going to talk about why leaders need a gatekeeper and why they need to develop a mechanism for people to get around that gatekeeper. And lastly, we're going to hit up, are you thinking deep enough and how to think deep enough to tell the difference between a black swan and a black elephant? Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Dave Sears. He has served 20 years in active military duty within the United States Special Operations Command and as a U.S. Navy SEAL officer. Today, he is the co-founder and managing partner at Xundis Global, and he's an independent consultant and author of Smarter Not Harder, 17 Navy SEAL Maxims to elevate critical thinking that is underlined and prosper in business and life. You know, in the last section, we talked a lot about using Russia and the invasion of the Ukraine as a metaphor for understanding how to think at a much deeper level, that things are not what they appear to be on the surface. And even though you or I may not be able to quite literally sit, Vladimir Putin down and have a convo with him and say, all right, tell me what's going on, Vlad, give me the info. We can't do that. But you probably can't do that with a CEO of a corporation that is looking to maybe buy you out, or maybe a CEO of a corporation that you're looking to take over. There's all kinds of, so we talked about using that as a metaphor and understanding that there's deeper complexity to all of those things. And one of the things that Dave talked about very early on in our last part of the conversation was that one of the things he noticed was that top level leaders were starving for really good information. And, this is a guy dealing with the White House and has dealt with high level command. He really struggled to understand, to get them to understand, because they're starved for information because of gatekeepers. And you and I, we all have our gatekeepers. We got to have them. We'd be bombarded with sugarness who want to tell us all kinds of stuff that's not relevant. But the challenge is that maybe we haven't trained our gatekeepers well enough, and so they keep everybody at arm's length rather than letting in the people through some other qualification. Talk to us a little bit about that part of it, because I don't know if people like Vladimir Putin have anybody come in, and that must be a pretty hard wall to get past from a gatekeeper position. But I don't know that the very big CEO of some multinational, let's say Tata, that their gatekeepers any different. Talk to us about the gatekeepers, the challenges with them, and what we need to think about in the context of how we train our own gatekeepers.
Yeah, right. So I think one of the most important things is, first, you can't kill the messenger. Mm-hmm. And that gatekeeper is often the messenger for many things that come up. So if you teach them that they're going to be slain for bringing you something that may not be perfectly relevant, may not be there, then they will react to that. It's just behavioral economics, right? They will start to see what your patterns are, and they will keep more things away from you. So you have to let them know that you're not going to slay the messenger. Then right. Two, you have to walk through with those gatekeepers and the close confidence that you have around you. You almost voice your thoughts, not almost, you voice your thoughts and your thinking process out loud so that they can begin to understand what are the things that you take into account when you make a decision or when you get information. How do I want to receive information? I often use that. One thing that I would do was I tried to make clear whenever I went to give a briefing or come up, is this a decision brief or is this an information brief? The information is important to have as a context, but now that puts my leader in the right framework, in the right state of mind. He's like, okay, I'm here to receive information. I'm here to gain more context on the problem, more awareness of what's going on. That's all I'm doing right now. Now, he may throw in a decision or two, may guide you one way or another and readjust your, azimuth or something. But then the other ones are made very clear. This is going to be a decision brief. I'm going to give you some context and some information. At the end of this, I'm going to ask you for a decision. So now they're in that framework of, okay, some guys can make it right there. Some gals can make it right then and there. Some want to process that for a couple of days and go, they all have their own sort of methodology. You have to understand that as well. But the more you as the leader can give your people and your gatekeepers an appreciation of how you think, do you make snap decisions? Are you able to digest information very quickly? Or do they realize that you need a day or two to sit on it and go, okay, I need to digest this and put it in context? And then the guidance that I like to the gatekeepers is, I want things that are going to add context and color to what I know, not irrelevant details. Can this be handled? My dad was a high up exec. He was an elected officer at Motorola for years, while it was still successful, before they made some strategic errors, right? And he used to have a saying, don't bring your monkey, you got a monkey on your back or a problem, don't bring it into my office and drop off the monkey and leave. No, I want you to come here with solutions on how you're going to handle it, what you're going to do. And if you need from me resources or guidance, then I'm there to give you that. But I'm not here to take over your problem. And a lot of times leaders will revert back to the last position that they had and want to step in and maybe even solve that problem or try to solve it. Okay, I'll take that from you. I got it. I've seen this before. No. Let your people figure it out. And with that, this is where you have to develop you've heard the single point of failure. We do not want a single point of failure. So I would advise, make sure you do not have a single gatekeeper.
Oh, that's interesting.
You need multiple avenues that people can communicate with you through, so that you don't have this one single piece that can stop everything up. And it's a challenge to do. And we develop that. You develop that usually through informal sort of mechanisms.
Yeah.
So you might have an official that sits there and does, but there's certain people that you say, this person has access to me. It may be a peer. It may be, I want to know whenever that person calls, look, they have some preferential access to me. And if and they might have my cell phone, whatever it may be, then I can go around. There is a mechanism to go around that. And when you have people that are that close to you, that you allow to circumvent the gatekeeper, they have to show a certain level of maturity and a level of due diligence of when they use that. Because they're not going to be on that list for long if you abuse that, right? And then you'll figure out whether they should be on that list or not. It doesn't take long. If they abuse it and you go, hey, look, here's my cell. Call me on this if you need this. So I think those are some methods. Make sure you don't have a single point of failure. One single avenue that you receive information from can be very dangerous. And two, you develop those informal mechanisms around you. So there's one sort of maybe formal way that everybody goes to that chief of staff or whatever it may be. But over here, I've developed some mechanisms that people can get to me, and they should, and I should be monitoring. How often do I hear from them?
Yeah, it's interesting. What I really liked was this piece you said at the beginning there, which is train your gatekeepers to understand how you think. Train them to understand your process. Because, like, I'll just use the example of being a guest on this show. Being a guest on this show, we have a set of criteria. If you don't meet that criteria, my gatekeeper understands, because we get, you can't imagine how many people want to be on the show, right? Well, the number one podcast for Fortune 500 leaders. All right, great. So you can imagine there's a lot of people banging on the door, and they're banging on the door to tell me about astrology or whatever. It's like, did you even look up at the show? Did you look at what it's about? Right. So it's pretty easy for a gatekeeper to go, no, 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 no.
Right.
There's a criteria that says this is what you have. However, within that criteria, my assistant knows if this is missing, look at that.
Right.
Right. This is really important. But if they have that, I don't care. Suddenly that really important thing goes out of the window. All right. So, how many Instagram followers do you have? How many Facebook followers do you have? How many Twitter followers do you have? Oh, well, you don't have those numbers, so you're not in.
Right.
Oh, okay. But is there other criteria that compensate for that in a large way that will allow me to say yes? If I have not described that, the nuance of my thinking, the complexity of how I look at it, and the other things that I consider, it's very easy to go, nope, that's not a fit. And then me get upset that how come you said no, because you're ahead of me, to say no to this person? And they go, because I followed your rules. Yeah, my rules are not my thinking. And I think that's really key what you said there. My rules are not my thinking. My rules are there as the guideposts, and are pretty solid. But as you said, there is also this other these other mechanisms that are clear to the people who are supporting you.
Absolutely. A big place that you see this, that's a challenge for companies, is the HR department and hiring. So the algorithms that are being in place now are not allowing that flexibility for you. And I don't know. And as the talent wars, ramp up even more and more, and your retention piece, when you have set these hard and fast rules around people and that they can follow, you're trying to set out a process and say, hey, here's the algorithm. Oh, this guy didn't even meet it. He didn't have an MBA from a Ivy League university, but you miss that's it. He's out or she's out. And if you dig deeper, you find out that they were, they lived overseas. They sailed on a sailboat for the first 2 years of their college experience, speak 4 different languages, went and started their own little firm and did investing and all this stuff and started up 6 different small businesses, but now want some stability and want to join a corporate world or something. You miss all that. You miss the color and the context when you're so rigid. That's, I think, the important lesson behind complexity and leadership is that it involves people. They're not robots. It is not an algorithm. As much as our data masters in Silicon Valley and elsewhere now want us to believe that if you have enough information, they can predict the future and make the perfect decisions. They can't. It's about people. And with that, you need some flexibility. We are all unique individuals with our own agency. And so having a grasp on that concept is very important. There's no algorithm to do this, and you miss a lot of opportunity and you incur a lot of risk when you ignore that.
So when you look at, it may be companies you've worked with, it may be companies you haven't worked with that you're simply an observation of. Is there a story, an example of a company who miss those nuances, who are very much, this is the way it is, ABC, you follow those steps, and then you're in, you're out, or, we're going to make a decision on it's going to be black or white? And is there also a story, again, somebody maybe you work with, or maybe somebody you've just observed, who is really understanding? Because in many ways we can talk about critical thinking, we can talk about systemic thinking, but the truth of it is that it's, in my thinking, is context and nuance, right? You can have all the systems and you should have all the ways to think, but if you're not connected to yourself and you don't know how to connect to other human beings, all that is, I can plug that into a bloody computer. It doesn't work. The commitment to be human and show up and say, yeah, my hair's a bit grayer than it used to be, and I feel a bit more uncomfortable with the weight around my belly that didn't used to be there. And I'm struggling with my marriage, and my kid is a bit wackadoodles. All those human things are also important. I'm not talking about coming in and backing up the truck and dumping all your garbage on each other, but I'm talking about making a real connection.
That's right. And it's realizing that exists for each individual in your company.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you're running some giant therapy center and sitting there going,
not at all.
But those are factors that you need to take into account. And I've seen it on all sides of the spectrum. And what you said, one of the things you said too was really important. I just got done with a company last week up in Orlando. They were down in Orlando, and self-awareness. And we talked about with the SEM, what are you? Are you a lifestyle company? They were a family-owned business. They are a family-owned business, and they've done a great job and they're very comfortable. You're like, okay, what do you want to be? Do you want to grow this and sell it to somebody else? Or is this here for your family to pass on to a next piece? And you're comfortable with a certain amount of revenue, and you don't need to keep some sort of a crazy growth rate to increase your multiple. So if you're growing at past inflation and you're happy with 7% a year or so, or 8% a year growth rate, fine. And is there a growth rate that will actually hurt you because now you have to hire too many people? So first figure out who you are. And that's not a bad choice. So they came to the conclusion, we are a lifestyle company. That's what we want to do right now.
Right.
And that's okay, good. I had another one that had no idea how to manage people. It was run by 2 PhDs. There's some good PhDs. They were
no PhD, right? You know what that means?
What?
Piled high and deep.
Yeah. Wow. Especially on, I have a different perspective. I'm biased, of course, but I have a different perspective of people who've earned their PhDs while they're working or doing something like that. So they're doing it for a practical concern than those who have gone the academic tenure track and then come to business. These guys were a complete failure. It was unbelievable how out of touch, maybe because they were brilliant. One was a social scientist, one was a physical scientist. And their ability to connect to people was almost nil. They had zero appreciation. They had their worldview, and they ran that company into the ground 10 days out of its almost complete dissolution. They were still lying to their people. Everything's going to be fine. And I can see it in the books, and I'm like, this is not going to be fine. You've got like a week. This is done. And they're telling their people a week out. They had no connection, and they had a very strict hiring policy. If you didn't come from one of the Ivy Leagues or some of the, like whatever, Michigan is well known for its political science. So if you didn't come from, Michigan for your political science background, or if you didn't come from Brown, or if you didn't come from Columbia, there was one gal they hired. She was great. Loved her to death. She was from American University, PhD, and they constantly belittled her as a non-academic, you got your degree. I'm like, it's American University. It's a good university. And judge her based on her merits. She's very smart. She knows her stuff. They didn't care. You didn't have, you're not in the upper tier. You don't have your credentials. And it was a failure. It was some of the most abject failure that I've ever seen, and some of the most heartless treatment of people that I've ever seen. And it was baffling. So I've seen,
as you said, people are not algorithms.
They're not.
Right. And I think that a lot of times we But again, let's go to this understanding here, which is the black and white thing. People are not algorithms. They're complex, and there's nuance to them, and there's personality, and there's all those kinds of things. So, we've got to understand human beings. And then the other side of the people on the other side of that are looking at it and going, people are messy. I'm not dealing with any of that. We've got to be more logical. Right. Well, over here, it's, it's cold, it's hard decisions. and I don't, unless you've got some business that I'm not aware of that somehow doesn't involve any human beings,
yeah, exactly.
Right? You're going down. You're going down faster than the Hindenburg. I mean, you're going down in flames. And it's not an either or. It's, as you said, it's the critical system thinking that is important, but it's also learning how to think at complexity with nuance that is considering what I call the emotional source code of the original of the person, the emotional source code of the organization, and how they have manufactured meaning from that, because otherwise it's just this is what we do. Well, we're dead in the water. So you're still lying, as you said, you're still lying to your people, and you're about to sink, and you don't even have the connection to say, listen, we ballsed it up. We're sorry.
That's right. Yep. And if you could see that farther out, you have to, and it doesn't always become I mean, this company was around for 12 years. So it does not become, and you don't know the clock that you're on. I don't know what clock Facebook or some of these places are. If you have you start getting this internal, I compare it to what I did. You start seeing an insurgency going on. What are the ruffles? What are the ripples beneath? None of these things, this Russia thing, Ukraine, they didn't happen yesterday. No. There's been things boiling below the surface. You don't have a steam outlet valve, and you're letting this pressure cooker go, and you're not even aware it's happening. And then it blows up and you're surprised. Where in reality, you can go, hey, there's a lot of offshoots you could have taken to vent off steam, to allow some pressure let off, if you have self-awareness and have a pulse on what's going on, and that you are an organization of people. And it's not, like you said, there are cold, hard decisions made in business, and it is, I'll equate it the same thing, going to war. There's sometimes you want to crush your enemy, crush your adversary. And it depends on how they act, whether we can be friends or how this works. And you have, I've had to get rid of people, fire people, different pieces along my career that's not easy to do.
No.
And it's a cold, hard thing to do because you're impacting their lives, but there's an interest to your company and things that you're doing, but you should be cognizant of what you're doing. Never was I not aware of the implications of what I was doing. And I had to weigh both of those. And that's how I sleep at night, is I say, okay, this is affecting their performance at this company, or my organization is affecting everybody else in this organization and how we perform. So I need to let them go, knowing that I'm going to affect them individually and their lifestyle and their family. But you weigh those two things and you say, okay, where are we? And can I help them move along or not? Maybe it's not the right fit and they can go somewhere else. Fine. So there are cold, hard decisions, but people are at the heart of this. And when we try to treat it like an algorithm, you're going to miss the boat, and you don't know when that ticking time bomb is going to go off, but it will.
And to add to that, because that's a very important piece, is what I call the ripples. So you fire somebody, you directly impact them, of course, but the ripples is maybe they're married, maybe they have kids, and there's an impact on their marriage, there's impact on their parenting, there's impacting on their mortgage, there's impacting on, a million things that you probably never considered. Maybe their mom needs surgery and they were saving for them, all those kinds of things. You've not looked at the ripples of the impact. You've also not looked at the ripples that were warning you. And I think that that's often the case. A leader years ago said to me in a conversation that nobody should ever be surprised when they get fired. And I really loved that, because it really said what needs to happen is you need to have had so many conversations with them so they can see where they're failing and they can ask for what they need, and you provide what they need, so that when the time comes, you go, you know what, you asked for this, we gave you this. Do you feel like we gave you what you needed? Yeah. This is not for you, is it? No. That's how it should be. Otherwise, we're operating in the world as if everything's a black swan event.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 years before the pandemic, there were meetings of very high level individuals that were public,
yeah,
right, that warned about a pandemic. Obama's administration was fully prepared for a pandemic,
yep,
right? Back in the day. They're not black swan events. The 2008 recession was not a black swan event. All the warning signs were there, and I can walk it back, and people go, well, so really that, that became from the overspending of George W. Bush with the wars and blah, blah, blah. And I go, no, that's part of it. Sure. But it's not it. And they go, oh, well, what is it? I go, well, Glass-Steagall. And they go, what's that? And I go, well, Clinton removed that, and as a result, you could buy mortgages and you could do all the crazy shit. It
right.
boosted his economy, but it really caused a lot of problems. And this is a ripple effect. Oh, so it's him. Nope. Oh, he's in the chain of it. Well, what is it then? Well, let's just go back to Nixon. Nixon? Watergate? No.
Exactly.
The gold standard versus the paper standard, right? He removed the gold standard. Now we went to the paper standard. That unstabilized the economy. Oh, so it's Nixon's fault. No, let's go back to the early part of 19 plus 100, the early 20th century, and let's talk about the creation of the Federal Reserve, which is about as Federal Express. It's got nothing to do with the government. It's a way to print money, and that was put in place. Oh, so it's them. Well, we have to go a bit back, and we don't look for what was the tidal wave that's building. The tsunami is a result of something. But if you stand on the beach going, oh, there might be a tsunami because I can see a 40-foot wave coming towards me, you're already dead.
That's right. Yep. And it's a convergence of all of those things.
Right.
It's not one individual thing. And the idea in complexity is, it's very easy in complexity. Cause and effect is only revealed in complexity in hindsight. So we often look at this and say, well, I could have known, or I should have known. You can't actually know how those things are going to converge, but you can make some appreciative decisions if you understand the system and say, or I have an appreciation of the system and how I'm intervening in this thing. And when I establish these ideas and when I get rid of Glass-Steagall, how much more am I putting on this ticking time bomb that's going to happen? And there is not that level of thinking done. Instead, we offer very event level symptomatic policy prescriptions or organizational fixes that, put a Band-Aid on it. Maybe we haven't taken the time out to get the Band-Aid. We're just using the old boxer super glue and be like, here you go. Let's just put some super glue on this cut. It'll be fine. Well,
yeah. Meanwhile, your kidneys floating out of your tuchus.
Exactly. And you need more of that perspective to look at things sort of holistically, and that there is no one thing. Who do we blame for this? Nobody. I mean, you said earlier, that's an interesting point you made, is it's a failure of leadership if somebody's fired and they're surprised by it. Not if somebody's fired.
No.
But if they're surprised, that is a complete failure of leadership.
Absolutely.
And it probably goes back to the ripple of the hiring piece as well.
Exactly.
In the leadership. So that should never exist. And you look at all those different things as they converge. What were the decisions you made along the way that all begin to contribute? There is no one thing. We often want to solve it by one thing. Well, I'm going to put a new policy in the HR handbook that says you have to talk to your guy once a quarter and make sure that That doesn't fix it. No.
No.
Thinking fixes it, and saying, look, leadership, know your people. How's that?
Yeah, that might be we might be pushing a bit hard there.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to your spouse. How's that sound?
Ooh,
I
don't know. I don't know if I don't know how to infiltrate that code.
Yeah. How many surprise divorces are there?
Yeah. Well,
I never knew anything was wrong. Really?
Well, there was research that I read in, I think it was like 94, and in 90, yeah, maybe 90, no, maybe later. Actually, no, it was later. It was 2004. And in 2004, they interviewed men whose wife asked for a divorce, and 60%, 61, 62, something like that, percent said they were completely surprised. They didn't know anything was wrong. They interviewed their wives, the women who'd asked for the divorce, and said, why is your husband surprised? And they said, because he's deaf, or that he ignored him. Like, so it's not that we don't know, it's that we don't want to know.
You said,
and I think that's a great metaphor for what's happening in business and on world politics. I don't want to pay attention to that because that's too shitty an outcome, and I don't want to look at that. So I'm just going to wait for the feces to hit the fan and then say, oh, I didn't bring my umbrella.
Yep. You mentioned Nassim Taleb's Black Swan idea, right? So
yeah.
People know a very low probability event with very high consequences, right? I wish I could tell you who I read this from. I can't recall, but rather than that, what he called it was the financial collapse, the pandemic. He said it's a black elephant. It's the elephant in the room. It's been there, and it's a high impact event, and you're ignoring it.
Yeah.
So it's been there the whole time. So probably better than the black swan, which is a very low probability event with high consequences. You say the black elephant that's got high consequences. You know it's coming. So what are you doing?
That's,
we ignore the elephant in the room all the time. We're deaf.
I think that very often leaders think they're Cleopatra, queen of denial. They just, they just want to be in denial. And I know that in older leaders, oftentimes it's well, I'm not going to be here in 5 years, so I won't have to deal with this. So I'm going to go out on a high. I'm going to, do everything it takes to go out on a high and leave everybody with the mess. And I don't think it's that calculated, but it's just like, oh, I just want to push it away. I don't want to confront it. And as you said, people are deaf. And so it's, the question is, if you get past the gatekeeper, somebody smart gets past the gatekeeper, are you willing to bloody listen?
Right.
Particularly if they confront your bias. Right? Particularly if they confront your bias. Like, you've got your idea in your head that it is this way, and this person comes in and goes, no, it's not. Can you shut up and listen for a minute and discover, oh my, I've not been looking at this.
Which is very, very difficult in an organization, because the way that the behavioral economics are set up is, you're my boss, you control my lifestyle.
Exactly.
You can get rid of me and fire me. This is why the role of consultants is important, or go beyond consultants. You can even go a cheaper way, is develop good friends and peers who will tell you what they think, right? And have this network that is not direct. Your decisions do not directly impact their lifestyle. You can, if you don't want to hear what I have to say as a consultant, get rid of me. Don't rehire me. I'm here to give you the best look that I can give, not to tell you what you want to hear. If you want that, I can recommend a bunch of, top 4 companies you could hire.
I can recommend a bunch of smoke machines, and I can lend you a skirt.
Exactly. Because that's what you're going to get. But it can be difficult recognizing that internal to an organization. And if you are a really good leader, you have fostered that, and you can have it internal to your organization. You cannot slay that devil's advocate or the person who comes in with a contrary view. If you do, you'll kill it for a long time and you'll have to reestablish a new culture. That's where the consultants come in as well, that you can say, okay, look, I can give you, I am not tied. My livelihood is not solely tied to you.
No.
So I'm giving you an unbiased view. It's filled up with my biases, of course, but as objective as I can sort of get. And I think another important part is as we look at these organizations or we look at leadership, we do a lot of attribution to things that happen and we attribute them to malicious sort of behavior. Like you said, the guy leaving a foot, they're not like that. It's not always malicious. There's just behavioral economics behind things. And a lot of these are subconscious moves that people make because
and sometimes
they're
it's just laziness.
It is. It's not.
Sometimes it's just laziness. That's all there is to it, right? Because as you and I talked about in the break, people don't think because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, but because it's like, I don't want to have, it's too tiring for me to think about it that way. I understand that. David, we're actually over and I really appreciate, I love our conversation. It's like our first conversation, it went over. Okay, but it's a lot of high value stuff, a lot of high material here for anybody who chooses to listen. And if you are, if you've got value out of this, I really want to encourage you not to hoard the information, but to share it with others, because this is an important subject. The subject of leadership is first and foremost learning how to think, but not only learning how to think in a systems way or a critical way or design way or any of those ways that we can talk about, but also in a very human way. David, this has been an absolute pleasure and a joy, sir. Thank you so much. Please tell our audience where they can find out more about you, about your book, and about all the other wonderful resources that you have.
Yes, you can go to dcsears.com. and that will guide you to everything else. Beyond that, you can go pick up my book, Smarter Not Harder, on Amazon, or reach out to me and I'll hook you up with a signed copy if you want to try that route. You can go find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. You'll find me at also thinkingcrisp.com or xundisglobal.com. And that
fabulous.
That wraps it up. I really appreciate you having me, Dove. I absolutely love talking to you. I learn a ton when I talk to you. I love it.
Thank you, sir. I hope you'll stay with us till the end. And for you, dear listener, you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you're looking at any problem. What is your level of thinking? And are you willing to embrace somebody who will, in fact, challenge your own bias, even if you don't know it's a bias? I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.